I got this to say. You're acting like a crowd of kids. The booing rose and died again as Piggy lifted the white magic shell. A great clamor rose among the savages. Piggy shouted again, "Which is better, to have rules and agree, or to hunt and kill?" Again the clamor rose. Ralph shouted against the noise, "Which is better, law and rescue, or hunting and breaking things up?" Welcome to Ostracon, a podcast that translates fragments into the whole from which they came. Today we're reading and talking about Lord of the Flies, a 1954 novel by William Golding. William Golding was a British novelist, playwright, and poet. He lived from 1911 to 1993. He published over a dozen books. He won the Booker Prize, the 1983 Nobel Prize in Literature. He fought in the D-Day invasion, but he's best known for his first novel, Lord of the Flies, published in 1954. In Lord of the Flies, a group of young boys approximately age 6 to preteen years are marooned on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean. And despite their initial efforts at order, things fall apart, degrading into a classic struggle between sheer power and ideas of order. I've left open the door in the room where I'm recording this episode so that hopefully you can hear the waves crashing against the beach outside. We'll start by reading an excerpt. Two things are important to know in this section that we read. You'll hear of two items: a conch shell, which was a shell that they could blow in to make noise to call a gathering in order to discuss their situation. Also, you hear about glasses, which belong to a boy who's identified as Piggy. They're used to start fires. They set off along the beach in formation. Ralph went first, limping a little, his spear carried over one shoulder. He saw things partially through the tremble of the heat haze over the flashing sands and his own long hair and injuries. Behind him came the twins, worried now for a while, but full of unquenchable vitality. They said little, but trailed the butts of their wooden spears, for Piggy had found that by looking down and shielding his tired sight from the sun, he could just see these moving along the sand. He walked between the trailing butts, therefore, the conch held carefully between his two hands. The boys made a compact little group that moved over the beach, 4 plate-like shadows dancing and mingling beneath them. There was no sign left of the storm, and the beach was swept clean like a blade that has been scoured. The sky and the mountain were at immense distance, shimmering in the heat, and the reef was lifted by mirage, floating in a kind of silver pool halfway up the sky. They passed the place where the tribe had danced. The charred sticks still lay on the rocks where the rain had quenched them, but the sand by the water was smooth again. They passed this in silence. No one doubted that the tribe would be found at the Castle Rock, and when they came in sight of it, they stopped with one accord. The densest tangle of the island, a mass of twisted stems, black and green and impenetrable, lay on their left, and tall grass swayed before them. Now Ralph went forward. There was the neck of land, the ledge skirting the rock. Up there were the red pinnacles. Sam touched his arm. Smoke. There was a tiny smudge of smoke wavering into the air on the other side of the rock. Some fire, I don't think. Ralph turned. What are we hiding for? He stepped through the screen of grass onto the little open space that led to the narrow neck. You two follow behind. I'll go first, then Piggy, a pace behind me. Keep your spears ready. Piggy peered anxiously into the luminous veil that hung between him and the world. Is it safe? Ain't there a cliff? I can hear the sea. You keep right close to me. Ralph moved forward onto the neck. He kicked a stone and it bounded into the water. Then the sea sucked down, revealing a red, weedy square 40 feet beneath Ralph's left arm. "Am I safe?" quavered Piggy. "I feel awful." High above them from the pinnacles came a sudden shout, and then an imitation war cry that was answered by a dozen voices from behind the rock. "Give me the conch and stay still. Halt, who goes there?" Ralph bent back his head and glimpsed Roger's dark face at the top. "You can see who I am," he shouted. "Stop being silly." He put the conch to his lips and began to blow. Savages appeared, painted out of recognition, edging round the ledge toward the neck. They carried spears and disposed themselves to defend the entrance. Ralph went on blowing and ignored Piggy's terrors. Roger was shouting, "You mind out! See?" At length Ralph took his lips away and paused to get his breath back. His first words were a gasp, but audible. "Calling an assembly." The savages guarding the neck muttered about themselves but made no motion. Ralph walked forward a couple of steps. A voice whispered urgently behind him, "Don't leave me, Ralph." "You kneel down," said Ralph sideways, "and wait till I come back." He stood halfway along the neck and gazed at the savages intently. Freed by the paint, the savages snickered a bit, and one gestured at Ralph with his spear. High above, Roger took his hands off the lever and leaned out to see what was going on. The boys on the neck stood in a pool of their own shadow, diminished to shaggy heads. Piggy crouched, his back shapeless as a sack. "I'm calling an assembly." Silence. Roger took up a small stone and flung it between the twins, aiming to miss. They started, and Sam only just kept his footing. Some source of power began to pulse in Roger's body. Ralph spoke again loudly. "I'm calling an assembly." He ran his eye over them. "Where's Jack?" The group of boys stirred and consulted. A painted face spoke with the voice of Robert. "He's hunting, and he said we weren't to let you in." "I've come to see about the fire," said Ralph, "and about Piggy's specs." The group in front of him shifted, and laughter shivered outward from among them, light, excited laughter that went echoing among the tall rocks. A voice spoke from behind Ralph. "What do you want?" Jack, identifiable by personality and red hair, was advancing from the forest. A hunter crouched on either side. All three were masked in black and green. Behind them on the grass, the headless and paunched body of a sow lay where they had dropped it. Piggy wailed, "Ralph, don't leave me." With ludicrous care, he embraced the rock, pressing himself to it above the sucking sea. The snickering of the savages became a loud, derisive jeer. Jack shouted above the noise, "You go away, Ralph. You keep to your end. This is my end and my tribe. You leave me alone." The jeering died away. "You pinched Piggy's specs," said Ralph breathlessly. "You've got to give them back." "Got to? Who says?" Ralph's temper blazed out. "I say. You voted for me as chief. Didn't you hear the conch? You played a dirty trick. We'd have given you fire if you asked for it." The blood was flowing in his cheeks. "You could have had fire whenever you wanted, but you didn't. You came sneaking up like a thief and stole Piggy's glasses." "Say that again." "Thief! Thief!" Piggy screamed. "Ralph, mind me!" Jack made a rush and stabbed at Ralph's chest with his spear. Ralph sensed the position of the weapon from the glimpse he caught of Jack's arm and put the thrust aside with his own butt. Then he brought the end round and caught Jack a stinger across the ear. They were chest to chest, breathing fiercely, pushing and glaring. "Who's a thief?" "You are." Jack wrenched free and swung at Ralph with his spear. The blow struck Ralph's spear and slid down to fall agonizingly on his fingers. Then they were apart once more, their positions reversed, Jack toward the castle rock and Ralph on the outside toward the island. The boys were breathing very heavily. "Come on, then. Come on." Truculently, they squared up to each other but kept just out of fighting distance. "You come on and see what you get. You come on." Piggy, clutching the ground, was trying to attract Ralph's attention. Ralph moved, bent down, kept a wary eye on Jack. "Ralph, remember what we came for. The fire. My specs." Ralph nodded. He relaxed his fighting muscles, stood easily, and grounded the butt of his spear. Jack watched him inscrutably through the paint. Ralph glanced up at the pinnacles, then toward the group of savages. "Listen, we've come to say this. First, you've got to give back Piggy's specs. If he hasn't got them, he can't see. You aren't playing the game." The tribe of painted savages giggled, and Ralph's mind faltered. He pushed his hair up and gazed at the green-black mask before him, trying to remember what Jack looked like. Piggy whispered, "And the fire." "Oh yes, then about the fire. I say this again. I've been saying it ever since we dropped in." He held out his spear and pointed at the savages. "Your only hope is keeping a signal fire going as long as there's light to see. Then maybe a ship will notice the smoke and come and rescue us and take us home. But without that smoke, we've got to wait until some ship comes by accident. We might wait years, till we're old." The shivering, silvery, unreal laughter of the savages sprayed out and echoed away. A gust of rage shook Ralph. His voice cracked. "Don't you understand, you painted fools? Sam, Eric, Piggy, and me, we aren't enough. We tried to keep the fire going, but we couldn't. And then you, playing at hunting." He pointed past them to where the trickle of smoke dispersed in the pearly air. "Look at that. Call that a signal fire? That's a cooking fire. Now you'll eat, and there'll be no smoke. Do you understand? There may be a ship out there." He paused, defeated by the silence and the painted anonymity of the group guarding the entry. Jack opened a pink mouth and addressed Sam and Eric, who were between him and his tribe. "You two, get back." No one answered him. The twins, puzzled, looked at each other, while Piggy, reassured by the cessation of violence, stood up carefully. Jack glanced back at Ralph and then at the twins. "Grab them!" No one moved. Jack shouted angrily, "I said grab them!" The painted group moved round Sam and Eric nervously and unhandily. Once more the silvery laughter scattered. Sam and Eric protested out of the heart of civilization. "Oh, I say, honestly!" Their spears were taken from them. "Tie them up!" Ralph cried out hopelessly against the black and green mask. "Jack! Go on, tie them up!" Now the painted group felt the otherness of Sam and Eric, felt the power in their own hands. Jack turned to Ralph and spoke between his teeth. "See, they do what I want." There was silence again. The twins lay inexpertly tied up, and the tribe watched Ralph to see what he would do. He numbered them through his fringe, glimpsed the ineffectual smoke. His temper broke. He screamed at Jack, "You're a beast and a swine and a bloody, bloody thief." They became aware of the noise that was the background to this fight, the steady, shrill cheering of the tribe behind them. Piggy's voice penetrated to Ralph. "Let me speak." He was standing in the dust of the fight, and as the tribe saw his intention, the thrilled cheer changed to a steady booing. Piggy held up the conch, and the booing sagged a little, then came up again to strength. "I got the conch," he shouted. "I tell you, I got the conch!" Surprisingly, there was silence now. The tribe were curious to hear what amusing thing he might have to say. "I got this to say. You're acting like a crowd of kids." The booing rose and died again as Piggy lifted the white magic shell. A great clamor rose among the savages. Piggy shouted again, "Which is better, to have rules and agree, or to hunt and kill?" Again the clamor rose. Ralph shouted against the noise, "Which is better, law and rescue, or hunting and breaking things up?" Now Jack was yelling too, and Ralph could no longer make himself heard. Jack had backed right against the tribe, and they were a solid mass of menace that bristled with spears. The intention of a charge was forming among them. They were working up to it, and the neck would be swept clear. Ralph stood facing them a little to one side, his spear ready. By him stood Piggy, still holding out the talisman, the fragile, shining beauty of the shell. The storm of sound that beat at them, an incantation of hatred. High overhead, Roger, with a sense of delirious abandonment, leaned all his weight on the lever. Ralph heard the great rock before he saw it. That's a good place to stop. This book is an incredible read. It's one of those that almost completely permeates you while you're in the middle of it, and you almost can't shake yourself out of the anxieties of the characters until you get to the end. You should read the rest of it. But what can we make out of it? When the boys first find themselves on the island, they take off their clothes and go running around swimming. The scene is visually stunning. It's beautiful. A beauty that is so unlike the isolation and desolation that they will suffer there. And the prospect of being without parents, without supervision, is exciting to them. It feels like a paradise. But in the naked innocence of this garden, we have immediately the meaningful image of the snake. One of the youngest children thinks that he sees a large one coming out of the woods and crawling over to the ocean. And from that point forward, the children are assailed with fear. The idea that there is no real peace attainable for them, that something unconquerable and undiscoverable is hunting them. Maybe even something like our own encounter with mortality, fragility, the toil of life, or the unrelenting temptation to do wrong things that never leaves us alone. They find early on that rules are needed. For example, they set up a place to meet. They find the shell. They blow the shell for meetings. They decide that they can't all talk at the same time, and it has to be like it is in class. So the person holding the shell is the one that gets to speak. But even though they have an innate sense that they need rules to function and to have order, it nonetheless falls apart. For example, they want to build shelters to protect themselves from the rain and the sun, but only a few people end up working on them. A lot of the others go to rest, to eat, to swim, or to play. They decide early on, as you heard Ralph say again and again in the excerpt, that they need a fire to make smoke, so that hopefully a ship somewhere within the horizon of the island could see the smoke and rescue them. But they don't stick to their duty. The people in charge of the fire don't tend it. It goes out, and in fact they even miss a ship that might have seen them early on before much of their suffering ensues. Why did they not tend the fire? Because they thought it was more fun to try and hunt. What they are unwittingly discovering is that rules are insufficient without love. Love may create order. Love may govern conduct. But what is a rule without a reason? What is the veneer of rules if they don't care for one another? Here's an example. The youngest boys on the island, aged about 6, are in tremendous terror and constant nightmare. They feel absolutely abandoned. And while there's a couple of efforts to round them up, to get their names, no one ever gives them the care or the understanding that they need. More than anything, they're a burden because they can't work. While there's the idea of a rule that they should somehow be rounded up and looked after, no one has the heart to do it for them. Some of the meaner big kids even knock over the castles that the little ones build in the sand. By the way, If you're listening to this and remembering the time that you read this book in high school, and now you're a parent, read it again. Here's another example. Piggy, who you heard in the excerpt, is called that because no one ever asks him his real name. He offers that he's called Piggy because it's better than some of the other uglier names that they call him. But nobody cares to know his actual name. While some of them stick to higher ideals for some things some of the time, the lack of any uniform commitment to some higher good leads to competitions of power, discord, eventually open war, violence, and theft. One of the little children is lost, presumably burned to death, when a recklessly wild fire gets out of hand and engulfs part of the island. Additionally, without love, they have no antidote to their fear. The drumming idea that there is some kind of beast on the island will not leave them alone, and the more they try to deny it, the stronger their fear becomes. It becomes such a precipice that they even kill one of the boys that they mistake for the beast coming out from the woods in the night. This was the boy who, journeying to the very heights of the island to investigate this question, determined that there was no actual beast. This was the boy who began to develop in his own mind a vague idea that they themselves were the beast. And it was in trying confusedly to convey this to them that he was clubbed to death. Afterward, the ideas of false beasts become a tool for power that supports a shift among some of the boys towards absolute worldly authority. Those in power use the myth of the beast to assert that authority. They paint it as an enemy, but they leave offerings to it in the woods, the heads of pigs on sticks stuck in the ground, in a way that looks like tribute, even worship, which it may be if it has utterly consumed them. The falling apart of their efforts suggests that the line between order and chaos may be much thinner than we think, and that the idea of rules alone are insufficient to keep us on one side of that line. The love that God is, and the love that He asks of us for one another, cannot be replaced with legislation. If we lose the notion of human dignity, if we lose the truth that we are all made in the image of God, then the fall, envisioned by this book, becomes easier. You find again that some of the most violent boys on the island paint themselves, and they're freed to do what they want when they're painted. The paint covers up their own image, and not seeing the truth of their own image in the image of God makes it easier to deafen themselves to the image of God in others. You remember in the excerpt how Ralph forgets what Jack actually looked like. Some of them replace the simple rules, like holding the shell to speak, with the rules of power. You heard Jack say, "They do what I tell them." But none of these rules prevent any of them, even the allegiant ones, from hurting one another, because they are frameworks without love. At the end of the book, when the adults finally come, another fire has gotten out of hand, and the paradise of the island is utterly burnt up and decimated, and a ship finally does come because of the smoke. When the boys come out of the burning forest before the soldiers that find them, they look again so young, and they all weep. They weep because they are once again united with order, perhaps even judgment, but even more, The rescue strips away all false notions of power, and they are raw down to the very core of their being, where lives the wish only to be loved perfectly as only God can love. And even though it is the re-encounter with the adult world that so strips them to this central desire, the point that it is only God who can love perfectly is nonetheless made clear, because the adults that come to the island are in the Navy. The reason that the boys have ended up on the island is because their plane was shot down during an evacuation. They have escaped their war, but they're introduced into a world that is also at war. And all the same dynamics and fears are at play, and they will be called upon again in the face of challenge to act with love. And this is the key to the symbol of the fire that permeates the book. The idea comes back again and again: keep the fire burning. The rightful chief who was elected at the beginning of the book holds on to this mantra. He holds on to it as his only hope, his hope of rescue. But it's a symbol. Rescue is in and of itself Christological. But the keeping of the fire, a symbol of the Holy Spirit that indwells us, the keeping of the light, the keeping of the hope, is the symbol that we keep the image of God and the truth of our identity alive. You heard the line in the excerpt, which Ralph says a couple of times, that they stole fire from us that we would have given them freely. They would give it freely even to those who are adverse to them. We must keep the fire burning. We must give it freely. We keep this burning hope, this burning truth, lest we fall into the dark.